Okay.
Hi, everybody.
Hello.
So we are doing the critique a lesson plan using the Universal Design for Learning framework, and we chose to do James Robin, who is a teacher who actually had his entire UDL lesson plan printed by Concord Cortonium Incorporated, which is a company that works with UDL designs. And we are about to critique his lesson plan on plants and living things.
All right. All right. UDL provides students equal opportunity to succeed. So we're gonna just like go over what the U briefly go over what the UDL framework is, and then we're gonna go into critiquing this UDL by using some questions that we came up with at the end. So, as I said earlier, UDL provides students equal opportunity to succeed. CAS created the Universal Design for Learning framework, and it remains one of the core levels of change to help make learning inclusive and transformative for everyone.
Yeah, so why of learning is the engagement, right? And so what we looked at, is it purposeful? Is it motivating the learners? Does it stimulate interest and motivates learning in general? And some learners might like to work alone, while others prefer to work with other peers. And in reality, there's not one means of engagement that will be optimal for all learners in all contexts. And we know this as teachers, that we need to provide different ways and modalities to teach.
Mm-hmm.
So providing those multiple options for engagement is essential, especially with UDL lesson plans.
Right. And then the what of learning, so representation. So it's really important that um, we are knowledgeable of our learners, and so that we are able to present information in various ways, because learners learn in different ways and perceive and comprehend information in various ways, you know.
Yeah.
And it's also important that we take into consideration students who have sensory disabilities, so like blindness or deafness or any other types of learning disabilities. So, and it's also very important that within a UDL lesson, that language and or cultural differences are also represented in the lesson, and make sure that we think about various ways that we can require different ways of approaching content.
Right. And so for us, the how of learning is the action and expression. So we looked at this strategic goal directed learners. Is it differentiating the ways that students can express themselves and how they know things? Learners differ in the ways that they can navigate the learning environment and express what they know. So, for example, individuals with significant movement impairments like cerebral palsy, those who struggle with strategic and organizational skills or abilities learn differently. And, those who have language barriers, like, me, and so forth. The approach of learning tasks is very different for each student, and UDL unifies that. So a good UDL lesson gives space and voice to all those things. Um, some might be able to express themselves well in writing text, but not in speech, and vice versa. And some people express themselves visually better. So giving room to have all kinds of different ways to learn. So if we design our instruction in such a way that centers students' diversity as the core strengths to be amplified, we will get a greater chance of being successful. And this has been proven with UDL lesson plans. So thinking about multiple means of representation, expression, and engagement when designing this kind of like lesson plans is really important and key. And that's what we really looked at. So we came up with questions to really see if those questions that we had prepared are in the lesson plan.
Right. So we were looking for 5 things within this lesson. So, like, is there a clear goal that is stated? Um, does this lesson plan encourage flexible means to achieve the goal? So, are there various ways for students to achieve the goal that the teacher has set for the class?
Mhm.
Okay. Does it ensure all learners can access the materials and environment? So, like, are there ways that the students can access the information visually, auditorily, kinesthetically? Um, we want to make sure we wanted to make sure that this lesson had various ways that the students can access materials and the environment. Okay. Is the learning personally relevant? So we know that when we incorporate things that the students enjoy or like within the lesson, they're more likely to be engaged. So, what is it in this lesson that keeps the students engaged? Is it
Right.
relevant to them? Okay. And then, does it promote expert learning? So, are the students able to use the information in which they receive from this lesson and be able to inquire further with the information that they learned from the lesson or like from the content? So how can how can this lesson create opportunities for students to inquire further information or promote further inquiry from students?
Right. So we're gonna post the UDL teacher guide beginning plans with our video, so everybody will get to follow through what we saw and what we're discussing. And this is directly representing nature, how we, especially plants, get food, right? Like how the roots and leaves of plants work together to provide food through water and sunlight, and how roots are expanded, and how we plant, and how we can graph it, and the growth, and everything that has to do with being a plant. So I'll start with, like, while we were looking at the lesson plan, our first question was that did it have clear goals? And we thought that it had very clear goals. They were established. The introduction with a focus on the main objectives were placed and done by using questions to engage the students. So there was like questions that each activity was going to answer. So like the first activity was, what are the parts of the plan and what do they do? And so from that, there was a whole activity that followed. Um, so we really thought that he hit the mark when, at least with the clear goals in the first question, right, Taiwo?
Right. And so it's also important that not only are the goals established within the beginning of the lesson, it's also important that the teacher is clear and knowledgeable, has clear, knowledgeable background information, and it's written to provide the students with information on the structure of scientific knowledge and structure of life. So it's important that prior to teaching this lesson, the teacher is able to make sure that all students are on the same page when it comes to having prior knowledge within this theme. And it is also important that the learning goals and standards are clear in the plans,
Yes.
right? Because just in case if you have if you are observed or if another teacher wants to implement the same plans, the teacher is able to clearly understand the trajectory of these of the lesson. Okay, and so it's like how to attain them are added and support the UDL lesson plan. They're concrete, they're achievable, they're paced through the units, and they're differentiated, which is very, very important with all our diverse learners. And from reading graphs to structure identification of plants.
Yeah. So we also checked that, like, the teacher makes the learning very personal, because it starts adding some activities that, like smart graphs, that they students construct throughout the unit, and robot helpers that can like ask predictions of what the student thinks is going to happen next through technology, for those students who might need a little more support. So that is our second question. Like, is it encourage flexibility? And we said yes, it definitely did provide the flexibility in this lesson plan to have supports and individual learning and was established with every activity.
Yes. And I failed to mention earlier, it also does ensure that all learners can access the materials and the environment.
Yes.
Um, and then also, I wanted to touch base on how this lesson has pretest. So
Yes.
it is very important that for this because we want to teachers want to be able to gauge what the students know, and then from there you can either scaffold or you can differentiate the lesson, even down to pairing, making partners for some of these activities. Okay. So it not only gives the teacher an opportunity to guide the learning, but it also helps the students have insight on like what they're going to be learning in the lesson.
Yeah, I want to also add like the misconception about plans, right? Tyler, like
Right.
he went into the reason why misconceptions happen and how we can help and support students with those misconceptions. And the clear knowledge background information is written to provide that students with the information of the structure of scientific knowledge. But it also adds to like some misconceptions that students might have and how we could provide and introduce the misconception into what it actually is by giving very clear explanations.
Yes. And another thing about this lesson that I appreciate is the fact that there are multiple opportunities for students to utilize charts and data. And so not only are they like reading, but they're also writing, they're also doing math. So I like the fact that this encapsulates multiple subjects within one lesson, which I think is really great for students because it gives them extra practice with each portion of the
Yeah,
lesson.
and when we looked at it, the unit overview of what the lesson plan had, it was almost like what we did with the thematic unit,
Right.
right? Like last semester. And so when Taiwan and I were looking at like every single activity, the activity length, the materials, the overview, it was very clear from the start what the lesson plan was going to be, what's going to be needed, how long it was going to take, and what part of that lesson in the question was going to go to the students for them to be able to discover through, like Taiwo said, through writing, math, or just observations.
Right. Um, and then there's multiple opportunities for students who are either who have different learning preferences, whether it's kinesthetic, whether it's visual, whether it's auditory. So, for example, there's an activity where they are observing plants and they get to touch it and they get to look at it and they get to really, really get a hands-on learning experience um,
Yes.
with this activity. And so this is helpful for kinesthetic learners as well as visual learners. And I think it also helps make something that's abstract more concrete.
Yeah. I feel like the the other activity that I really saw throughout is that he uses T charts for the students to understand the structure of the plans, regardless of the environment. So he started talking about like one problem that his neighbors encountered, and then like he introduced cactuses and how cactuses get the same light and water and adjust to the environment. So he has a lot of activities that are T charts, which are visual, and the kids get to draw and observe what the activity has planned. So it was like really well designed under the UDL design video.
Okay, and then this is where we would like to conclude our UDL critique. So real quickly, we're going to wrap up what we were looking for. So, for example, we were looking for the following. Anna, did you feel that it started off with a clear goal?
Yes, definitely very clear. And it was not just like overall for a lesson plan, but for every activity. So, Taiwo, did you think that it encouraged flexible means to achieve the goals?
I did think that it encouraged flexible means to achieve the goals. So there was multiple ways that the students were able to obtain the environment or the lessons, whether it was kinesthetically, visually, and also being able to encourage um,
Their own personal growth, right? Like,
exactly. Yes, thank you.
yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. Like when we taught, like when we read it together and we went over it, I felt like that was the first thing that we both noticed right away. Um, I feel like he does ensure that all learners can access the material in the environment. I mean, he has from, photometers in the computer to
Mhm.
text to audio to many other activities to make sure that it accesses everyone, and all the materials and the environment in the learning seem to be focused on having the students know more about plants and how they grow.
Okay, so now is the learning personally relevant?
Mm. I don't know, Taiwo.
I was stuck on this one too.
This one, I feel like it's necessary for the students to know about, right? Like the cycle and like about
Hmm.
plants, but
Hmm.
is it really relevant to third to sixth grade?
Right.
I don't know. I mean,
Um,
I guess it's important, but I don't know if it's relevant.
right. I agree with you. I don't think it's relevant, at least for them, but I do feel that it is important. And I feel that it is important because in order to have a better understanding of our environment and like how things work, we need to be able to know how things work, right? And I
Right.
think when we learn how things work, we have a better appreciation for the role that they play within our life cycle. Like it's important that we have plants because they produce oxygen, right?
Right.
Um, and so on and so forth. And
Yeah,
like,
I mean, I think like exactly what you said. I think that it is important that they know it, but I even with all the activities that were so kinesthetic and hands-on,
mhm,
I didn't see relevant things for third through sixth grade,
right?
right? Like it didn't seem like to be something that I would at that age be that interested in doing.
Maybe third graders, maybe like third or fourth
Maybe third
graders. I
graders,
don't know
yeah,
about upper grades.
yeah. So, um, did it promote expert learning?
I think it did
Yeah,
because it provided plenty of opportunities for students to gather data and just have practice with observing things and gathering data. And what else did you think?
yeah. Like I feel like exactly what you said. It had not only the teacher was extremely knowledgeable because when he started adding the misconceptions and the many ways
Mhm.
that the students maybe didn't know all the ins and outs of the scientific method. I also saw that in the lesson plan overall, it was very clear that what he wanted to introduce was the objective, and how he did it was with the question. So, like, he made them experts of their own learning by answering that question. And
Mhm.
then at the end, if you notice, the pre-test and the post-test of the lesson was the same question. So he wanted to see how much they learned from what they already knew. So I
Right,
feel like that made them like owners of their own learning.
right, right. So Anna, would you recommend this lesson plan?
I think that because it was written by a professor who is an expert in UDL lesson plans, and it's like 20 pages long. It stated a lot of information and activities that were great and very engaging, but I don't know if it's something that I could possibly do as extensive as he wrote it.
Yeah.
How about you,
I
Raul?
I liked where he was going with it, especially if I'm a teacher at a STEM school, for example, that I love that it was very scientifically driven. I love the introduction of the scientific method. I love the various opportunities for students to graph and obtain not only qualitative and quantitative data,
Yeah,
but like you said, this is very extensive. And like realistically speaking, it doesn't seem as attainable for teachers to do within within like I feel like already science is already
not
short.
as yeah, it's not even as studied in many
Right.
times. It's once a week if we're lucky, right?
Well, right. So
So I agree with you on that. I like reading through the UDL lesson plan. It gave me some really good ideas, and I like the activities. I think that they can be modified for preschool and for early childhood.
yeah.
But I think that this was more for like older elementary,
Right.
maybe even middle school students.
Right. Yeah. We're
So 4 out of 5.
4 out of 5. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. We're all done. Thank you for watching our video. Bye.
Bye, guys.